Hey guys, welcome back to the Jasmine Ortiz Show. You're here once again with your host, Jasmine Ortiz, and my lovely co-host, Jordi Polycarp.
Hi.
So this week, we're going to talk about a lot of interesting things, including our current events, starting with some of the reality shows that are returning back to the air. One show that definitely has always intrigued me is Too Hot to Handle. That concept for the show is just so interesting and taboo. It's crazy how they're able to do a show like that, and it's interesting that it's coming back.
Yeah. I think it really speaks to what our generation is up to in terms of the dating game. For those who don't know, basically the premise of the show is that uh these certain number of singles, I think it's 20 or 15 or so singles are on this island, and the challenge is that they have to not be physically intimate with each other at all. And apparently that is so difficult that it costs them a lot of money. But I think it is really interesting to see what the showrunners think that our generation wants to see, and the fact that they were right, which is kind of funny. But Too Hot to Handle, Love Island is back as well, that I've been seeing a lot of people talking about, and I also started watching this week. A lot of people talk about dating shows and kind of the trends of how that works out and types of people that get more attention and types of people that don't. So that's been interesting to see that play out on some of these as well. And I feel like every time I sit down to watch one of these reality TV shows, I kind of know what's gonna happen. And they always do a really good job of picking the first couple 10 or more contestants, and they'll be like, okay, here's one black girl and one black guy, and then maybe one other person of color somewhere on the line, and that's it. And those are usually the three people who don't get a lot of attention, or the guy usually does, but the girl does not, for various reasons.
And it's the same thing on Bachelor or Bachelorette. You always see the same pattern sort of happening, and it's really awkward when you see that.
Yeah. Also kind of a thing where people who are on this show because they want to get married and actually find somebody, or at least on their original Bachelorette. But
I feel like the people who go to those shows to actually find love and get married are few and far between.
mm-hmm.
They can play it up for the cameras as much as they want, but ultimately I think a lot of those people, if not most, are there for the social media fame, notoriety.
It's an interesting conversation with the way that it extends to our scripted television as well as our non-scripted television. A lot of people have been talking about Bridgerton coming back, and I don't know if you guys had seen, but that article in the Spectator that was basically ripping Bridgerton to shreds for having a plus-sized love interest, with quotes like, quote, pudgy Penelope, and saying that fat girls are not hot, end quote.
That is such a bold claim to make in 2024.
The blatant fat phobia that you are, as a publication, that you are willing to publish is a little bit insane, because you can't tell me that this wasn't peer reviewed prior to releasing it. But it really is unfortunate, because it really points back to the ways that the media we consume is or should be a representation of the cultural ethos right now, the pop culture ethos. And it sucks to hear an opinion that feels like it was straight out of 2002. I wish that we had more media that would just kind of allow plus size women to be beautiful and soft and feminine and be upfront, and not always have to be hugging walls and things like that.
Yeah, I think Shonda Rhimes in general has done a really great job in perpetuating the diversity that is needed in a lot of these casts and giving different demographics of people time to shine in the spotlight. And regardless of who they are, what they look like, what roles they've played in the past, I mean, you've seen a lot of rising stars emerge out of Bridgerton that
Mhm.
were previously unknown actors or actresses. So I love that Shonda is breaking down these barriers.
And I think one other take I've been seeing from some people about how in this particular series or the season of the series, um, the acting and emotions and things like that have been a little bit slower or less obvious, and that it's boring them. And right, whereas I think if you're the kind of person who like likes literature and likes cinematography and like enjoys watching people and characters grow, I feel like you'd like this season. I feel like our generation really wants to be told and not shown. Whereas I feel like really good pieces of work will do all of the showing instead, and you can kind of infer from there. And a lot of people have talked about
Yeah.
one particular intimate scene with Penelope as the main character and somebody else. Sorry, spoiler alert.
The
Uh,
carriage scene?
no, actually,
Oh.
another one in the second part, where some people said it was too slow and they got bored. And for me, I feel like it was a really beautiful piece of work because it might be the first time or one of the first times we've seen a plus size woman in an intimate scene where like her curves and like back rolls and things like that are on display, but not as a joke. um and
Mm-hmm.
it reminds me of like movies I used to watch in like the early 2000s where the big girl was always the butt of a joke and the larger characters were always supposed to be there for comic relief, and it was so outrageous that anyone would like them, or by the end of the movie they end up with like the other least desirable character. And in this case, it, for me at least, might be the first time I've ever seen a plus size woman on screen actually be loved and cared for in a not ironic way. And I think a lot of people are skipping over that, which is unfortunate. I think it's a really beautiful piece of artwork, and we should really be giving them their flowers.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm excited to get to that part. I actually just started watching Bridgerton recently. I was one of those people who didn't want to fall for the hype, I guess. And I just started watching season 1 and I love it. I'm like,
Mm-hmm.
oh. So
It gets better.
I'm slowly getting into the current drama, but just from what I've seen so far, I really appreciate the diversity in the cast. I think it adds to the story.
I guess it's building community a little bit in some
Yeah.
ways. But also, I think right now, especially we talked about from the cultural, from the like music industry side of it, the kind of like trashy party girl is back. And the release of Charlie XCX's new album Brat is a really big part of that, and she's going on tour with Troye Sivan actually for this year.
Yes. Yes, Troye Sivan era part 2, let's go. It feels genuinely like all the music we had in middle school or early high school is starting to make a return 10 years later in this new modern way. And it's exciting because it's the first time that we're getting to experience this kind of hyper pop or even recession pop music as
Mm-hmm.
adults. Scary on the recession part, but aside from that, at least we can enjoy this sort of upbeat, carefree, energetic sort of lyric, musical elements and visual as adults, where we don't have to kind of go through the barometer of our parents allowing us or not allowing us to listen to this kind of music.
Exactly. I think that's what it is. Like the kind of like gritty, trashy party girl that we got from Kesha, she was so singular of that time, or at least that's what it felt like. But now I feel like we have more examples of it, especially like Camila Cabello, the ways that her music has changed and her style has changed to start fitting this kind of like party girl aesthetic as well. Tove Lo, who, if a lot of people remember her from like more of her hits from a couple years ago, but she's been kind of back on the scene as like a like queer party girl as well. And it's this kind of like really interesting Kesha effect that I like it actually. I feel like it's fun.
Yeah, it feels like the people who were maybe a handful of years younger than Kesha when she was at her like top are now refurbishing that sound and like bringing it to the forefront again. And we're getting to relive that part of our childhoods, but as adults who are still young in our early mid 20s and allowing ourselves to like okay, embody that aesthetic, embody that vibe again. And I think honestly this will inject more energy and life into the going out scene that is desperately needed
Mm-hmm.
because honestly, listening to modern current music in the club just does not hit the same as 2010s or 2000 music. So
Yeah.
I'm hoping that this new wave of like reviving that older sound is going to do that again for us and give this next era its own distinct vibe.
Yeah. And I really think it will. I think that the ways that this current genre of pop music and like hyper femme pop music, I think it's connecting to the ways that we've also been listening to like hyper pop, and now it's bridging the gap between the two, and I think it's expanding its demographic a lot. Trippy Red is kind of he's not hyperpop per se, but like the ways that that sound infiltrated hip hop and things like that in the past like 10 years, I think it made it a very like male dominated sound for a second. Like the ways that we were using like auto tune and like really like gritty raw vocals to talk about dark stuff. It's been very like hip hop, male centered, and I think they took that sound and made it very like sparkly and girly and like let's all have fun and do illicit activities and have a really
Yeah.
fun time and like be covered in glitter. And I think we've been missing that a lot in the past couple of years. I think we did have so much of it in the early 2000s, and like recession pop 2008 kind of vibes, but now I think Gen Z is so unapologetic about that kind of stuff that it's like bumping the music up to like top 40 right now, in
Yeah.
a way that's really interesting to see.
It definitely is. And I think specifically with the Camila Cabello rebrand, I think that is super unique and interesting to me because Charlie XCX and Tovlo have been doing this exact style of music, had this sort of gritty aesthetic for the past decade.
Mm-hmm.
They're well known for it already. They kind of went a little more quote unquote underground. They were out of the mainstream for the better half of the last decade because it wasn't what was really popular. Now that it's rising in popularity again, they're at the forefront. Camila Cabello just kind of saw this trend and I think hopped onto the scene at the perfect moment where she didn't really have anything holding her back image wise. She had gotten out of that long term relationship with Shawn Mendes. She just dyed her hair. She had this new album already prepped and ready to go. So this has clearly been a premeditated rebrand and planning for some time, probably because she saw the writing on the wall from Charlie XCX really getting pushed out into the forefront of Gen Z's pop culture again and realizing, okay, that sound is what's happening. Maybe Camilla herself had always had an interest in this sound and then wanted to see how she could explore it. But I will say, marketing wise, the timing of it couldn't have been better for her than it is right now.
Yeah, I agree. I think her PR team is so smart. I think
They
they
have been
yeah.
popping off, putting her on every relevant red carpet. I mean, I don't think, I feel like she's probably been to the Met Gala before, but I've never heard her be talked about as much as she was this year at the Met Gala,
Yeah,
specifically because of that freaking $22,000 ice purse.
insane.
That was so smart doing rage bait like that
Yeah,
because
rage bait is the best word for that.
honestly, rage bait is legitimately the best marketing ploy at this point.
Mm-hmm.
And I think people are wising up to it, but at the same time, people always want to give their 2 cents. So I don't think it's a form of marketing that's going away anytime soon.
Definitely not. I think they did a great job. Not that I support capitalism necessarily in that way, but like it was really smart. It did get her talked about, and I'm actually kind of happy for her. Like, I whatever artists are doing to get themselves back in the forefront, it's working. And I did genuinely like her like first single off of this one. I love it. It the like imagery of it, the visuals for the music video were really interesting. I think it was edited really well, and I think it did a really great job of reintroducing her almost to her fans and to new fans of like she was somebody before, and now like it's bumping her back up to like maybe she can be one of these top pop artists of this year, maybe.
It definitely feels like she is coming out as an entirely new artist, entirely new persona. One thing that I found interesting is the guerrilla marketing that she's been doing around Miami locally.
Mm.
Because one thing she's emphasized a lot with this album is that she's always had a theme, a time, a topic for albums, but she's never had a place. The place for this album is very clearly Miami. And Miami being her hometown, she has this deep connection to it. So, for example, she did a merch pop up at a 7-Eleven in South Miami, which I think is so funny because her music video is like filmed in a 7-Eleven. And she also did a live demo or live performance or something of, I think I Love It at a skate park
Mm-hmm.
in Miami as well. And it's just like these kind of engaging events definitely are going to help her build up that new fan base that she wants and needs. Let's move into a quick commercial break before our next segment. Hey guys, welcome back into our next segment. In this segment, we're going to be talking a little bit more about our topic of the week, which is going from concept to creation. In that topic, we want to discuss specifically how culture can play a role in branding and rebranding. Something that we were just talking about with Camila Cabello definitely plays into this directly. For example, in her past efforts, her past albums and single releases, she has touched upon elements of her Cuban heritage. She's done songs in both English and Spanish, done bilingual songs. Senorita is one of her most popular tracks and releases. She's definitely never shied away from her Latinidad being a part of her artist imagery. However, one thing she hasn't dug deep into in the past is her Miami roots. And I think being from Miami or living in this city, having it influence you in any way is such an integral part of who you are, especially in your teenage years or young adulthood. This city can really, really shape you. So I think it's super interesting that she's finally leaning into that and describing this album as specifically an album or an ode to her city. Specifically, it is about Miami. It's set in Miami. This is an album for Miami. She even mentions Miami-Dade in a couple of her song titles, like one of her songs, Dade County Dreaming, 305 Till I Die, Hot Uptown, Boat, BOAT. I wonder what that stands for, but Boat is a very Miami concept in and of itself. But I'm just curious about how she kind of came up with this ideation of the rebrand, if it was her, if it was her team, if it was a mix of those things, because it's so purposeful but also so uniquely her.
I think my hypothesis is I think this is who she's been the whole time. And I think that it's a really, because I don't think it came out of thin air, especially like being from Miami. Not that the only thing about Miami is being like a party girl and having fun and summer and things like that, but I do think that maybe this is a way of her bridging her two identities, or two of her many identities, because I feel like her previous album in particular was supposed to be very much about like her family and her culture and things like that, and I feel like she's always been kind of in that realm for a while. um and I think that having that and leaving space for both of those kinds of parts of her, that and the kind of like fun being young in Miami and like growing up as a young person in Miami, I feel like us like having gone to at least can relate to it a little bit. Like we got it older, but I do think that it maybe is what people want to see from her a little bit more, and I do think that her previous persona was um losing her fans a little bit. I wonder if she's gonna continue with this or if there's gonna be something new in a year or two. But I do think that they've done a really good job. Like her and her team, it feels cohesive. I feel like I understand exactly who she is now. And I like seeing her having fun, if that makes sense. I think that
Yeah.
our generation likes that.
They covered all the bases in this rebrand. They did not leave any stone unturned, from the way that they're marketing singles and the album, to the imagery, to the photo shoots, the hair change, the sound of the music, where they're doing physical marketing events in Miami. All of those things are very, very purposeful. And it almost feels like to her, maybe this is like a homecoming, going back to her roots. I read somewhere in an interview, she had mentioned that this album was kind of born from hanging out with a lot of her friends, going out again in her old stomping ground, like back here at home in Miami, after having lived away for so long.
Mm-hmm.
It must feel very cathartic for her to revisit those old habits, almost that old energy, and then bring her new knowledge, or having grown up and like bringing a new perspective to the places that she used to go.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that might be like the theme of the album overall, looking back at your hometown from the perspective of someone who's lived somewhere else and now appreciating it even more,
Mm-hmm.
because Miami is a very special place. And if you were from here and you grew up here and you left and went somewhere else, I think it only gives you more room to love and appreciate it moving forward.
Yeah, I agree. I feel like it's always a really beautiful thing and a very important thing when artists make the like homecoming album, like the album that return like brings them back to their roots and their childhood and their like teenage years in particular and what that was like. Um I feel like it's really nice that they are examining it from the lens of somebody coming back. I think Dominic Fike's last album did a similar thing. People are calling it like the Florida album. And
Yeah.
it felt really nice that it wasn't the like Miami Uns Uns kind of
He's from
album.
Naples. He's from Naples.
Naples, yes. He's from Naples. And it felt very just like calm and authentic and
Mm-hmm.
genuine, bridging the gap between your culture and your branding. And culture meaning like anything that makes you who you are and who you've been. I think is a really big part of successful and authentic branding as independent artists, especially like trying to find your story and ways to explain who you are through your work and through your imaging and your visuals and social media. It's kind of scary. Like it's a very weird thing to try to package yourself as a human being in a way that is easy to understand and to market to the masses. But I do think it's one of the most important parts of being able to market yourself successfully.
Absolutely. I think finding the perfect balance between your own authenticity and making something that feels relatable to the general public, or to whoever your audience is super important. Everything that you said recently is making me relook at this in a different way. Like, this is Camila reliving those early years, maybe like her late high school, teenage years, where she was sneaking into the clubs with a fake ID, like hanging her head out the window, driving down Biscayne Boulevard, going to the beach in the middle of the night when you told your parents you were staying over at a friend's house. I think that is kind of like a quintessential Miami experience. Whether you're growing up here as a little kid to adulthood, or even in college, I think a lot of those experiences have some degree of overlap. So, looking at it that way and remembering how I felt being young and wild and free and, careless almost freshman year of college, I definitely think, especially in that point in my life, I would have related to her new album more than ever.
I feel like for me as well, like trying to find my own musical identity and trying to brand myself as an artist is something I've thought a lot about in the past year, and how to package that properly. Being somebody like from the city, from New York, but like also from Queens, and like from a Caribbean family, like being a daughter of immigrants, and then also wanting to make music that can connect to these different parts of myself and like other kind of like first gen American daughters. Um but in a way that doesn't alienate family. I think that there's a lot of judgment and fear that goes into it. I feel like one piece of advice that I've gotten as an artist from like other people in the industry, let people unfollow you, and that you don't need to appeal to everybody because they're just making room for the people who genuinely align with who you are and your brand and your message and aesthetic, to find you a little bit better.
I think part of Camila's issue before this rebrand was that she was too generically appealing to everyone, if that makes sense. She had some very popular top 10 Billboard hits like Senorita, Havana, that very much used the Cuban American sort of story and vibe and like bilingual elements, and that was working for her to a point.
Mm-hmm.
But then as soon as Latin music became pushed more and more to the forefront, fully Latin reggaeton, Bad Bunny kind of vibe, Carol
Mm-hmm.
G, a lot grittier, a lot dirtier, a lot more sensual. It wasn't really giving her space to do this Latin pop, English American side sort of thing because it felt almost out of touch
Yeah.
with what was coming straight out of Latin America. So I think she had two options here, either to pivot and do the Carol G route and go full reggaetonera, do música urbana, that kind of vibe, or do what she did and go completely into the American side, pivot onto that identity, and use specifically her identification of Miami as a party city to root her in that scene.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that was really the smartest move for her because that's a market that she has the resources to tap into, but it's also not super oversaturated.
Yeah.
So it gave her the perfect leverage point to divert attention into her new sound while also losing the least amount of fans at the same time.
Yeah. I think that's a really good way to explain that. And it is 100% what she did. I'm really enjoying seeing like Nigerian, South African artists being able to make their music so unapologetically them and having it be so popular in the Western market. I think the way that that branding has worked has just created such a really strong sense of community, and especially among like the immigrants from those places, or like kids of immigrants from those countries, being able to be like, I listen to this music at home. Like, I've been hearing this kind of music since I was a kid at my family barbecues, but I kind of had to keep it to myself, and now everyone's listening to it, and it's playing on the radio, and it's playing at parties in a way that's like you are able to be proud of where you come from and unapologetic about where you come from, and put things in English and in different languages. And if you don't know what this means, too bad. I'm really enjoying a lot.
All right, we're going to go into a quick commercial break before our next segment. Hey everyone, welcome back to the Jasmine Ortiz Show. I'm here today with a very special guest, Gabriel Gonzalez, one of the co-founders of Miami-based brand Casalú. We're here to talk to you a little bit about his process with developing this product from concept to creation, as well as a little bit about the brand history and who you are as a person as well, Gabriel. So first of all, welcome to the show. Thank you so much for being here with us today.
Thank you for inviting me, Jasmine. I'm pretty excited. Excited to share the story of Casalú and tell everybody a little bit more about it. We're Miami based. I am originally from Venezuela, and the story really starts in North Carolina. Out of all places, we have a special place special place in our heart for North Carolina because us three founders came from different parts of Latin America. Ricardo and I came from Venezuela, and Gustavo came from Ecuador, and very young, and went to college in Raleigh and NC State. That's where the three of us met. And years later, after we had graduated, that's really where the inception of Casalú happens. And it was a combination of things. I mean, really, there were two components that kind of aligned together. The first one was something very personal, in this case to Ricardo, because he never actually liked beer, but he
Okay,
loved
understood.
it. Yeah, I mean, like, he was not a beer drinker ever. So he would show up, in college and way past college, to places with Smirnoff Ice and, my car's
Yeah,
lemonade. And but he loved the beer moment. It's kind of what you do with your friends after work, when watching a game, sports, and you kind of get left out of it.
yeah,
And that was truly how he came across hard seltzers during the pandemic. Your White Claws, your Trulies, and then eventually High Noon. And when he looked at High Noon, which was just getting started, it was very evident. He looked at the can and it said vodka and soda. And he said, "Well, I've always been drinking rum and soda, so this is just putting it in the can." Also, I'm like blasting Bad Bunny in the background with my white can in hand. It's like, if
yeah.
my if my if my Latino friends see me with this, they're gonna crush me. And so that's, I think, the other part of the story, that it's even more important, because it was combining that moment, an alternative to beer or a complement to it, but with our culture front and center. And if you really think about it, our generation has been switching or absorbing this new way of consuming brands and products, in this case, hard seltzers. And we really didn't feel there was anything built for us, and that was really thinking about us, Gen Z Latinos, how we think, we're from here, but multicultural. A lot of things that just felt fake about big corporations that were trying to speak to us. Um, so we wanted to bring that authenticity, because we were seeing how our culture was simply, Latino culture is now pop culture. So
Absolutely.
so that's something where we really believed in, and said, look, actually, we really believe the next Red Bull is going to be Latino. Um, let's take a shot at it. And that's how the inception, I would say, of the idea for Casalú really came about. A product that didn't exist, and then a brand that we felt needed to exist.
That's incredible. I love how you described every element of that story. And I 100% agree with you. It felt like there really wasn't anything specifically marketed, geared towards us. And I think one of my favorite elements of Casalú, besides the flavor, of course, I love that too, is the brand identity. So I want to talk to you a little bit more about
Mm-hmm.
how you developed that and how you've curated that on social media as well,
Mm-hmm.
because social media presence is paramount for any brand. How
Right.
did you go about planning content and sort of crafting that social media strategy to be so relatable to this demographic?
Look, and I'll be honest, it's an ongoing process. It's been, I would say, a challenge and an opportunity. So let me tell you the truth, and how it all happened. When we first got started, we knew we needed to look, um, very real, ahead of our time, let's say, and just with an idea. And we were making the product in a soda strip. Like, when Ricardo first started making the product, it was like he went Target, went full on Breaking Bad mode, start mixing, you know, rum and water and stuff. And then I come in and visited one time. He's like, "Oh, let's try this." And I was like, "Oh my god, like, okay, there's something here."
Yeah.
And then eventually, is that we come to the conclusion, like 6 months later, that a big brand could exist. And but when it comes to the creative, it was the very beginning was, okay, we need to look in the way that we want our audience to really understand it. So we brought a designer into our team very early on, someone super talented that was very far removed from Latino culture. And that presented a challenge because we needed to explain what, like, hey, can you add more Bad Bunny to this? Or, kind of like more Arcangel flow right here, like
Yeah.
put some gold on it. This, and she's from North Carolina, like from, she lives in Wilmington now. Like,
Yeah.
what the hell does that mean?
Yeah.
And but for us, it was very natural. So we were like, okay, we have this thing in our head. How do you explain it, like, to someone? So it was a process, and I think having someone who was completely removed from it helped us articulate that in the very beginning.
Because
So
it forced you to be super specific with them.
right, and because you can't say like, oh, let's do something in Spanglish. Like, even Spanglish, like, I think a lot of people get this wrong, right? Like, you're like, oh, let's combine words in, Spanish and English. It's like, not really. Like, it has to be really how you speak. Like, would you
Yeah.
really say that? And it's like, you've never said, you never said, come to mi casa. Like, that, just no one's ever said that.
No.
So we were like, we gotta be real. Like, we gotta be us, right?
Yeah.
And explaining that to someone was just the very beginning of that creative process. Which at the end of the day, if you really think about it, and this is Ricardo's bread and butter. So he's the expert here, but there's a role of a creative director, right? Like, you gotta articulate a vision in a way that the people who have the skill to implement that vision can understand and execute. So, I mean, we can go in a lot of different directions here, but that was just the beginning. I think after that, a lot of it was gut feeling. So what we understood was we need to look at options when we come up with concepts. So from the very beginning, things that I remember was, okay, do we want a minimalist can or do we want a maximalist can? Like, the minimalist is just one color and it has the name Casalú, and then the other one is like a door open to our culture with different elements of who we think we are, like, different, very specific. In our case, we use certain plants, and if you look at the can right now, if you look at very close, there's like a pattern for what's in the middle that resembles or reminds us of, like, tablecloths we would find like at our grandmother's
I
houses.
totally see that.
And even those little things was just like, we wanted it to be something that was meaningful, that we can talk about it all day long. Whereas, there are simply other products out there where, the people who came up with it would just tell you, no, I made it yellow because I wanted it to pop. And that's the
Yeah.
extent of the explanation. Whereas us, I can tell you the colors of the details, and talk about it for hours.
I love that. We're going to get into that even more in depth in our next segment. I want to ask you something else about you and your experience as well as a Latino in the US. I also grew up in I grew up in Pennsylvania, so it's a place that doesn't have a huge Latino community. I had to really find a lot of my connection to my culture within my own family, within one or two friends that we had locally who were also Puerto Rican or Latino. How did you preserve and protect your Latinidad in a community in North Carolina? Did you find other Latinos there? Did you just kind of stick to your friends, or did you find that it really didn't impact you in any way?
No, I think it's critical to my identity, and I think it was actually beautiful. And I'll tell you why. And a lot of it has to do also from a business perspective. So first, the way we kept it was I was lucky. I had an aunt there who had left Venezuela 30 years before and ended up in North Carolina. So in my case, I can always go tiny bit back home. And my cousins
Yeah.
were born in North Carolina, so I completely understood what it meant. Like, I'm very Latino to be American. I'm very American to be Latino. What am I? And
Hmm.
understand like the role that that identity played because I saw him growing up and I saw it myself. I mean, I came here to the States very young, and I think one special thing that happened was like we all started kind of gravitating towards us. Like we did find a group of Latinos who came. I'm from Venezuela. It was the first time I really interacted in depth with friends who were coming from all across Latin America and Latinos who were born in the US all at the same time.
That's really cool.
And because if you think about it before, like if you're in Mexico, you're only interacting with Mexicans, right? Typically. Or in my case, just Venezuelans. And then you go out of the country and it's like, okay, now I understand Latinidad even further. And you
Yeah.
start seeing the patterns of what's common. So in our case, things that we brought back to Casalú was we know we can't put everybody under the same umbrella because we all have subcultures. But what are the things that unite us? And I was at a pregame in 2012, and they come in, we're hanging out, and a friend comes to me and says, "Hey, ya estás tropical?" Question mark, right? Like, are you feeling tropical yet?
Yeah.
And I'm like, I'm so far away from home drinking. I was like, okay, like this is in Venezuela we say prendido, which means like, are you boss or
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
And but this felt like it went so much further. Like you're in the right moment with the right people with your group, and I was like, the next day or so, like I started that playlist. It was Latin music playlist that I called Tropicalation, which was like
Mm.
that's like the name of the feeling I get to being with your community of who you consider your people, no matter where you are,
Yeah.
and that just kind of grew organically over, kind of like 10 years later. And that was the name Ricardo was giving to the drink when he first gave it to
Oh.
me when I visited him. So it was like, this is the feeling. Like, this is what Latinos bring to the table. Like, this is the common thread.
Hmm.
Um, and
I think one of my favorite things
that's it.
about Miami is what you're describing also. I think being in Miami, I moved here 6 years ago to go to
Mm-hmm.
UM. So
Okay.
I totally understand, going to a different place for university. I think the cultural integration of Latinidad and American culture in Miami specifically is what helped me connect, I think, the most to my own culture.
Yeah.
Because I really did not get to see Latinidad in play at large scale where I grew up. So it's extremely comforting and validating to see a brand like yours also kind of using the same Spanglish euphemisms that I
Right.
grew up hearing, and it feels genuinely so organic and relatable.
Yeah. And it is. What you're saying is absolutely true. Is that overlap between American, like, quote unquote American culture and Latin culture, and I think that was partly special for us when very, when we were getting started and when we were before even God started, which was we also started realizing, and this was critical for Casalú. I studied entrepreneurship, and I could see basically Americans taking bets on ideas. That
Mm-hmm.
is something that typically does not happen at all in Latin America. Um, Even the concept of angel investment and venture capital and
Mm-hmm.
taking those kinds of bets in business, we're simply not there yet across the continent. And that opened my eyes to understand that that was the right way and something that I think our generation is always our generation of entrepreneurs, you and I to take bets on those who are coming behind us.
Mm-hmm.
And we are kind of that way of Latinos who's opening doors that haven't been opened before. So their brand, and the company in this case, plays a role there that goes beyond just, just the drink.
Absolutely. And to wrap up this side of the segment, I also
Yeah.
wanted to ask you, who in your life inspires you the most?
Uh, I would have to say my dad, honestly. Like, um, he we we left Venezuela in a period of time that was very dark for the country, and he kept working his butt off to help put his three kids through college in a country thousands of miles away, and that was very special. So I always think about like what that took,
Mm-hmm.
and yeah, like I'm very grateful. Like how are you grateful for where you're at, and don't get distracted by silly things, and just keep the eye on the ball, which in our case is just building something meaningful. And I think I always go back to that example.
That's awesome. I definitely relate to that. Seeing how much my parents sacrificed. My dad came here when he was very young from El Salvador. My mom was born in Puerto Rico, but my grandma was born in Spain and
Well,
immigrated to Puerto Rico when she had my mom. So it was definitely a moment where both of my grandmothers at one point came to this country without speaking English,
hmm,
learned while they were here, left behind esteemed educations or careers or positions to give their children the opportunities that they were able to have here. So I completely understand that. I never take it for granted. I think it's one of the biggest driving forces in my life as well.
yeah, because it takes sacrifice, right?
Yeah, always. All right, thank you so much. We're going to move into a quick commercial break before our next segment. Hey
Cool.
guys, welcome back to the Jasmine Ortiz Show. We are still here with the wonderful Gabriel Gonzalez, one of the co-founders of Miami-based rum and soda brand Casalú. So right now we want to talk a little bit more specifically about the concept to creation pipeline. So you touched upon this a little bit as far as the background of the brand, what inspired the visual, what inspired the story. I want to get a little bit more into the nitty-gritty of, as an entrepreneur, how did you go from making this from a concept, like you said, with the soda stream and product development into, okay, oh my goodness, now it's in a can? How did you
Yeah.
how did you bridge that gap? How did you even look into distributors? Did you kind of just put money up front or get an investment? I think those questions are what pique the interest of young entrepreneurs everywhere. Just kind of, where do you even start?
Yeah, amazing. So the the aspect for let's call it the foundation of the business, which is our our line in alcohol. The way the, the way it started, um, so it could be turned into a reality, was okay. We have this idea. How do we get it to be real? So we got into a startup accelerator where 60
Mm,
companies competed. We were five out of the 60 selected. And first, it gave us a little bit of validation because it was investors choosing who would get in. We were one
mm-hmm.
out of five companies who was not in tech. What that means,
Wow.
what that meant for us was these other companies were talking about betas and having customers and putting something online and getting cash. Whereas for us was like, we were talking about culture and how Latinos are matter. And we're like, holy crap, like we need to do something about it. And when you get into that accelerator, you got $5,000 of non-diluted funding. With $5,000 of funding you barely can pay a lawyer in the alcohol space. So what we did was we said, okay, we know where our customer is. It's in Miami. At that point in time, we were not living in Miami, but it was always a second home. We knew kind of where to go, and we bought a keg on Amazon to graduate from a soda stream to a keg, and we rented a tiny house behind the tiny house in like the heart of the west side of the design district. So at that point, it wasn't the prettiest place.
It's like Little Haiti or
In
Alapata
town.
almost.
Yeah, exactly, but like right under it. It was a little ghetto at that moment. But we had a blast, and what we did was we started crashing parties. So in the startup journey, this is what we would call the validation. Do people actually want this, right? Because to build a meaningful company is, do people actually want this? Are there a lot of people like this? Can I get to them, right? And for us was, okay, we know how to get to them. So we just started crashing parties. Like literally, we show up with a
That's
CO2 tank and a keg. It's like, try my thing.
Who's gonna turn you away when you brought a keg? I mean, come on, that's an invite.
Well, the first reaction was like, who are you and what are you doing here? And it's like, no, someone told me, like, I'm good. Just try this.
Just trust me.
And then we never left. People gave us their feedback. We started seeing some patterns where we would make people guess like what's in it, and they would just guess their favorite alcohol base. Like some people would say gin or mezcal. There's nothing even close to it, but that's kind of what told us that it was more about the drinking moment. And we always wanted to have rum because it was, to us is really our what we think is what we always saw as a liquor of choice across most of Latin America. Obviously, we also have agave-based liquors in Mexico, but the rest of the countries really have a prominence of typically cane sugar alcohols, in this case, rum. And
definitely relates to that as a Caribbean
yes,
background.
Exactly. Exactly, right? And I think for us, it was also like, we were always frustrated with the notion of rum being like Captain Morgan. It was like, this is not what we drink, man. Like we could do better. So we always had that special connection to rum. But
that's
anyway,
awesome.
like, yeah, it was critical for us. From there, we had created like this fake website, and like a publication found a picture of one of our parties that we did here at a boat in Miami. To this day, I don't even know how. It's called Snack Shot. It's one of the most important publications in the consumer packaged goods industry. It's grown a lot since then, but her name is Andrea Hernandez. She's from Honduras. She just moved to Austin. I don't know how she found us, but she put us in a publication, and then a venture capital fund reached out to see what we were doing. And I think that gave us the confidence to say, okay, we need to raise capital. So that's a whole another story. But what we did was we raised money officially around the funding, and then that's what we used to really start the process of, okay, your drink that you had in a keg, can't really put that in cans. You got to have an industrial formula that's sustainable to process in a manufacturing facility. That took 6 months to get to. And then buying cans, wrapping them, boxes, all these processes that we never had any idea how to do. Like our first boxes, like our first cans didn't say the calories and stuff. Our first boxes had like a typo in it, and we had to buy like tape to cover it, like with the right calorie count on the box. And it was just all these rookie mistakes we made, but we kind of pushed through. And then what really accelerated us in the beginning was it was the three of us knocking on doors trying to sell our thing. We had a third party logistics company, so we didn't have an official distributor, which is a major mistake if you're starting in the alcohol business. Don't do that. But that allowed us to get face-to-face time with owners of different spots, and eventually we created a really good relationship in the industry, in the music industry. So within 3 months of launching the brand, we were like in music videos with Fade, like
That's awesome.
with brand being showcased, and it was like, okay, that opened certain doors on a kind of culture credibility, I would say. In parallel, we had this little PR package we used to use for like big influencers or celebrities. That was a Discman, so like a CD player with headphones, and it would tell the story of Casalú. We had recorded it in a studio with a friend, and then he had what I considered to be the top 23 tracks in the history of reggaeton until then. And we started sending that out, and one of the people we sent it to was the owner of Total Wine, which is the biggest liquor chain in the country. And he fell in love with it. So that was our first shot, really, at a true account, I would say.
Wow.
We started with 3 stores and 3 cases, and that grew to 15 stores with 15 cases each, and then on and on. That was really how we went about growing. And then at that point, we got a real distributor called Breakthrough Beverage here in Florida. So it's going back to your original question, like, and really tied onto process. I think this is still true for a lot of our concepts, both in the creative and what you see in social, and what you see in product, which is, okay, what's the hypothesis, and how do we make a very small test for what could grow? So, before we started working with big influencers, how about we work with some very small ones to see what the dynamic is and how does it work and what kind of results we get? How do we, if we want to do commercials, okay, how do we test some very short form ads on social to see what kind of messages make more sense and what kind of messages do people react more in our environment, and then having the right references. I mean, we're seeing a lot of amazing references coming up from Spain, actually. So Vicio, Nude Project, 2Js, those are amazing brands doing amazing things that are leading the charge, I would say, globally for sure, compared to a lot of what we see here in the US. And we take a lot from those playbooks in our own way, though. Like, it's very important for us to stay authentic to what Casalú stands for, which I know I didn't say it in the beginning, but for the listeners out there, Casalú, which is our name, stands for Casa, which is our home, is our heritage, of course. But then Salud, which is how we say cheers or how we pronounce it. Not necessarily how we spell it, but it's an invitation for everybody to partake in Latino culture.
Wow. I was going to ask you about the name, and I love that. That's incredible. It's very clear to me, and it gave me chills at several points during your explanation, how much love and care and detail and thought went into every step of this process. And I think anyone who's a self-starter, who's an entrepreneur, even myself as an independent artist, we care about the individual little details that can be overlooked by other people. So I think it's incredible that you are so hands-on and your co-founders are so hands-on with the continual development of the brand. One of my favorite moments on your social media recently was the novela sort of ad skit that you guys did. I think that was absolutely hilarious. To sum it up for everyone listening, essentially, they were a group of friends drinking Casalú, and it was supposed to be a girls' night. But one of the girls' boyfriends shows up anyway and is chismeando with the girls, like he's one of them. And then it's just this whole thing where the girlfriend had told him all of their tea already.
Yeah.
So he knew how to jump into the conversation. I was dying. That was so funny. And it's one of the only slightly longer form ads on Instagram that I've actually watched all the way through because I had to know how it ended. So awesome job with that. I love the social media integration and how integral it is to maintaining your brand identity.
Yeah, social is a key pillar, and like you said at the beginning, right? Like any brand owner or any creator um, needs to figure out how to play their game.
Mm-hmm.
And we knew from the beginning we were a little, let's say, I would say we're a little shy. So you don't see our faces as much. There's a lot of brands out there who are founder led brands. So you see a lot from the founders. We wanted to, we wanted for culture to be front and center. We'll show up here and
Mm-hmm.
there, but we wanted culture to be the protagonist, so that, for example, in that type of content what you're mentioning, that it was something you could relate to. They'd be like,
Mm-hmm.
even if it hasn't happened to you, it could happen to you. Instead of, me as a founder telling you about telling you
Yeah.
things about Casalú. And that integration is like, how can you see the brand come to life in your own daily routine and moments of experiences and consumption. And that's something it took us a while to learn that.
Mm-hmm.
But here's the thing. Here's where all our whole social media strategy comes from. We would ask people the following question. When was the last time you followed an alcohol brand?
I think you guys, for sure, for me.
Most
Because you
times it was
post
blank
interesting
stares.
content. Yeah.
Most times it was blank stares. And it was like, okay, we could
Mm-hmm.
do what everybody else is doing. Just post pictures of your can over and over again in different settings and cheers and those kinds of things. But man, we gotta bring value. Like
Mm-hmm.
it has to be witty and funny and culturally relevant, and sometimes be filled with pride as to what other people like themselves, talking about our audience, are doing. And we get down to the actual work. So we have our WhatsApp link there, where typically it is always going to be Ricardo and I answering.
I was about to
And
ask you about that because I
that's it.
love how simple the website is as well. I was taking a look at it, and the WhatsApp connection is so pivotal for that authentic Latinidad, Latin American connection.
Yeah,
Because as someone who frequently communicates with friends, family in Latin America, everyone uses WhatsApp.
yeah,
Any other form of communication, it's like, what's wrong with you? You better
yeah,
use WhatsApp. So I thought that was so distinctly unique. How do you go about optimizing that? Is that more so a feedback channel? Is that where you want to interact with fans or
yeah.
customers?
It's both. I mean, I think eventually it'll get out of hand, but not yet. I think it's twofold. You know, um, first the main thing is like, hey, where can I find you guys? And we try to optimize that, because sometimes they're in stock, sometimes it's not in stock, and we'll be like, hey, it's Gabriel here. Like, first of all, nice to meet you, and that builds in like
Personal connection.
100% conversion. Whether you're gonna buy
Yeah.
Casalú or not. Now it's like, wait a second, like, why is the founder
This
of
is
this
a
brand?
real person.
Yeah, like, what are they doing here, right? And for us, it's extremely valuable, because then hey, what's your favorite flavor? Have you tried it before? Where did you try it? What would you like to see us post more about or less about? What was your favorite piece of content? Why? Yeah, why that one or why the other one? And also giving them exclusive access. Like, if you're on our WhatsApp, we're gonna send you some of that content way in advance for feedback, for you to just take a look, for a share if you want, and you are gonna be ahead of the curve. And the goal is just to keep building that community there,
Mm-hmm.
which I feel like oftentimes that we were a bit allergic, I would say, to even to the word community, because I think it gets thrown around a lot. And but I think it was more about, like, we hadn't found our way to do that, and this is the way we build it. So now we're in a comfortable place to say, okay, here's really how we're um, building community, doing our exclusive drops. So when we have designs that are coming for, like, I don't know if you've seen the Latin America um, design wise, but we'll give early access, and also, yeah, it's a feedback. Do anybody wants this? Because then you take, as an entrepreneur, you might take risks. You might launch something that nobody really wanted in the first place. So here's how we keep that mentality that we have with the keg, now bring it in, to digital, and that's really why it exists.
That's awesome. I wanted to ask you, are there any new projects coming down the line, new flavors, new launches?
There are. We're working on 3 new flavors.
Ooh, that's exciting.
Which I
My
may
current
not.
favorite is maracuya.
Okay, sweet, cool. That's people's. It takes a people's choice award for sure. It make a tremendous impact on our business. To be honest, like, it became 70% of our sales within 2 weeks of launching, which is crazy.
Wow.
And it's coming on 6 packs by itself instead of a variety pack within 2 weeks. So you're gonna start seeing it on
That's
the shelves
exciting.
before July 1st. And
And we
then
can find it at Total Wine, right, in Miami. And what are other locations?
Yeah, absolutely. So you can find it in Total Wine. You can get it on Instacart and GoPuff. So if you just don't want to move from your couch, that's where you should go. But then we have a very good local presence as well. So All the Milams, which is a recognized small chain here in Miami, Grove Liquors, all the vintage liquor stores in Miami. And text us on WhatsApp. We'll tell you what's closest to you. And hopefully, if we can rally our people, maybe we get Publix soon enough.
Absolutely. I'm rooting for you on the shelves of Publix. I hope to see it by 2025. I'm rooting for you guys.
Yes. You got to do it. Make it easy for people to find it,
Absolutely. I mean, I'll be on the WhatsApp. I'll be reaching out. I want to get a little case of the maracuya.
Let's do it. Let's do it.
Thank you so much for your time, Gabriel. This has truly been a pleasure. I am so happy to be able to share a little bit more about your story, about the brand with my listeners. Thank you so much. I'm really looking forward to seeing what you guys do moving forward.
No, amazing. Thank you for giving us the opportunity. And for everybody watching and listening, you can find us at Drink Casalú on Instagram and hit us up there. We will welcome you to the family.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Gabriel. We're going to move into a quick commercial break before our next segment. Hey guys, welcome back. This is our last segment of the day, our community corner, where you ask us questions and we give you advice.
Yeah, so I got a couple this time. Our first one that I got says, what do you do if you feel like your partner isn't taking initiative? I feel like I haven't had a lot of experience with this because, like, I think taking initiative, it doesn't always come easily to some people, and I think it looks very different for different people. I think when it comes to being in a relationship and trying to make sure that everyone feels taken care of and heard and appreciated and respected, there are certain, I know that we all kind of have our own expectations of what we want. I also think there's a general, like, things you should know, if that makes sense. And not to be antiquated, but I do think sometimes gender does play a role in that, and how people grow up and expectations that have been put on them, and like culturally as well. I do feel like the ways that love is shown and demonstrated change based on how people grew up, and like love that we've seen practiced by our parents and our family. So for me, at least, I feel like in past relationships, I've felt like there are things that didn't occur to me that would be important or would make somebody feel special, and vice versa. I think there are things that I was doing that I was like, of course, this makes sense. Like, you have a need, I have noticed it, I will fix it, or I will add to it. And the other person not noticing I was doing it at all. So I think it does kind of go back ways. If you're the kind of person who feels like your partner isn't meeting your needs in the way that you want, I think it's always okay to voice that, um, and to at least make sure that they are hearing you properly. Because some people just, it doesn't penetrate the first time, but open communication is the best part of relationships. So if you feel like you're not being taken care of the way that you want and need, I don't think it makes you like unreasonable or high maintenance or anything like that. I feel like that word gets thrown around a lot for women, that we're high maintenance when we want things a certain way. But yeah, regardless of gender, if you're the kind of person who feels like you're not quite getting what you want out of a relationship that's important to you, it's always fair to ask. They always say closed mouths don't get fed. I don't necessarily know if I believe in that, but at least being able to advocate
I like the
for
meaning
yourself.
behind that. I mean,
Yeah.
you need to open your mouth to say what you want and
Yeah.
need. And I also want to say something about what you just said. Like, I don't think being high maintenance necessarily is a bad thing. I know it can be thrown around as a negative term and it has a negative connotation. I personally will say I am high maintenance in certain things and low maintenance in others, or like I'm high maintenance to be low maintenance, if that makes sense. But I don't think someone should ever make you feel bad about having high standards for something. That's something that I struggle with a lot in relationships, in friendships, just in my life. Being able to ask for things that I want or need to feel loved and not feeling guilty about it. I think getting past that guilt is something internal that I need to work on more so than something I need to put on like the other person, because the other person can't read your mind. They don't know what your expectations are unless you've set them or discussed them. B, they are not responsible for any guilt that you might feel because of past situations or relationships. And C, as an adult, you have to advocate for yourself. So I personally am trying to learn this lesson through exposure therapy, honestly. And as a recovering people pleaser, as a recovering people pleaser, it can feel so violent to try and advocate for yourself. And that sucks, because you should feel okay and allowed to put yourself first, if not at all times, at most times, especially when it comes to your happiness. So for me, if you feel like a partner's not taking enough initiative, talk to them. And I'm mainly telling this to myself because I need to listen to my own advice. But I think... Oh, do you hear that? Someone's drilling.
I can't hear it.
Okay. Sorry. Anyway, I think meeting someone where they're at is important. If you know that their relationship history, their dating history is not very experienced, or it's different than your own, they might not even know like where to begin, where you're coming from. If their experience with certain interactions or events is drastically different, their expectations in their own life are drastically different than what you would want or you want to set in your own, then that's a conversation that needs to be had. I don't think there's necessarily anyone in the right or in the wrong in this scenario, because you also have to take into account what means the other person has to fulfill whatever expectations that you're setting also. For example, if you were previously dating someone that was able to take you on extravagant trips and take you to 5-star dinners every weekend, and all of a sudden that same person has a pay cut, or the next person you're dating does not make the same amount of money, you have to respectfully adjust your expectations if you care enough about that person to be with them in that situation.
Yeah.
And in adjusting those expectations, because it's so awkward to talk about finances in a relationship, in adjusting those expectations, I think what you can do, instead of completely erasing, okay, why, let me backtrack. In adjusting those expectations, you need to identify what elements of those things fulfilled you. Because it wasn't just the fact that it was a fancy trip or an expensive dinner, it was the thought and the planning that went into it. So, what can that person do that is less expensive or less intensive to plan that still fulfills those same needs for you? Instead of it being a 5-day trip to Paris, maybe they can plan a 5-hour road trip within your state. Maybe they can plan a 2-hour excursion, just do something that you've wanted to do. I think just talking about things like spontaneity, date planning, taking initiative, sharing that emotional and mental burden of creating fun new experiences for each other should be a top priority within a relationship. Because if one or both of you are not doing it, or it only falls on one person, resentment is going to grow and you're going to get into a rut of bad habits.
Mm-hmm. That's really well put. Yeah. I think especially the part about like doing things that are within that person's means is super important, because it's always the thought that counts. Like if they really care to show you that they want to be there for you and that they care about you, it doesn't matter the quality of what they do as long as they're thinking about you.
I agree. I'd rather someone pick flowers from the side of the road and deliver me a handcrafted bouquet than, someone who has the means to spend all this money on something extravagant and then just doesn't.
Yeah.
So I think regardless of someone's economic status, if you are dating them, if this is a person that you love, that you care about, what matters more than anything is the attention to detail and how much they listen to you when you express your needs.
Mm-hmm. Well said.
All right. Do you have any other questions?
Yes. I got one more that was asking about friendship. This one says, what do you do when you have a friend who is too demanding? I feel like we both have examples of this, or the same example.
Yeah.
I feel like depending on your friendship with this person, and demanding is a really broad word that could mean a lot of things, and I think everyone has their own kind of like expectations on what they need out of a friendship. I think that there are certain friendships that eventually you need to end, and I feel like that sounds really bad, but if a friendship is a two-way street, and if you're in a place with this person where you feel like you're giving more than they are, and you're not really getting much back, not that it has to be transactional, but if mutual care and respect doesn't feel like it's the main thing of this friendship, then I think it's at least worth a conversation. Some people are really hard to talk to about this kind of thing and will let their egos get in the way, and will say, well, I'm not the problem, you're the problem. But that's not necessarily someone you need to be friends with, especially at our big age. Like, I feel like being the kind of friend that has to have everything you want your way all the time is very childish behavior. And I think we all deserve better. So I would say at least voice how you're feeling, because you shouldn't have to walk around eggshells around someone that you see as your friend. And if they care about you, they should understand how they're making you feel. And if they're still not really changing their ways or taking how you feel into account, then sometimes it's okay to let go of certain friends.
I think an example of this is like if a friend is constantly expecting you to be at their beck and call, like, they need a favor. Can you rush over right this second, drop what you're doing, and they expect you to be there. But then you need a favor and they cannot return the same energy to you. Or even expecting you to behave a certain way or dress a certain way or, kind of pretend that you're a certain way.
Mm-hmm.
Like I've had friends or acquaintances in the past that have sort of behaved like, okay, well, we're going to go to this place, but make sure that you don't dress like this because we don't want to present the wrong image of XYZ. And I think
Whoa.
people who are very image focused, for better or for worse, can be really difficult to be friends with, because my main priority when I'm going out with friends to a place is, yes, like, do we want to match the same vibe? Will I be like, okay, we're wearing cocktail dresses, or we're wearing going out clothes, or we're wearing business casual? Like, I'll be transparent about what the overall vibe is, but my main priority when I'm going out with friends is that they feel comfortable and hot in whatever it is that they choose to wear. But if you're the type of person who's like, it needs to be exactly this, or this person doesn't fit the look that we're going for at this establishment. I've literally had that told to me about another friend from like a third person. Like, oh, that person doesn't meet the look of what we're going for.
Wow.
And I was just like, that is so shallow. And
the person
it shocked
as a whole,
me.
not even their outfit.
The person and their vibe.
Wow.
Yeah.
Sorry.
And that shocked me because I think that even goes something beyond being demanding. It goes to like another level of narcissism. Like, everyone has to fit into the box that you ascribe them to be in. But when it comes to other elements of being a demanding friend, just like in a relationship, you don't want to put necessarily a negative connotation on the word demand or being high maintenance, quote unquote, but you also have a threshold of what your boundary is on that.
Yeah.
So I know that I'm not everyone's cup of tea. I don't think every person is everyone's cup of tea, nor should they be. I know that not every man or person could handle me in a relationship. Quote unquote handle. That sounds bad, but what I mean is, I know that not every person would be fulfilled being in a relationship with me, just like I would not be fulfilled being in a relationship with every different with every different type of person either. So I think it's totally okay to find that exact reality in a friendship and realize, I'm not meeting this person's needs, they're not meeting my needs, we're butting heads, this is going to end up bringing more harm than good. And an example of that is something that Jordi and I both kind of went through in college, where we were in a situation where one person constantly expected us to invite them to every little thing that we did, no matter what it was, no matter when or how we found out, no matter if it was planned spontaneously in the moment or not. Anything that we did, if we breathed, if we went to Publix, they had to know about it.
Yeah.
Right? But then this other person was allowed to go out to do any sort of event, any sort of party, any sort of thing that they wanted to do without so much as mentioning it to any of us. And personally, none of us cared, because it's like, we all live our own lives. We all have our own little subgroups and friends. Why should we have to tell each other every single thing that we're doing? It's more so understood in a friendship that you go out of your way to make plans with that friend or with that group of friends. Anything outside of that is your business, frankly.
Yeah.
That's not what was happening here. And an entire drama ensued because of one instance where this friend was not explicitly invited to something. They were also not explicitly not invited. They just were not in the room when people decided to go do something. So I think that sort of demanding friendship, where it's very one-sided, they want to be clued in on everything in your life but give you no information about theirs, can be extremely toxic very fast.
Yeah. I also think those kinds of friends are sometimes a little bit emotionally manipulative, and need to feel in control of their relationships and their friendships. And I think we don't have to talk too much about this person in particular, but overall and in general and hypothetically, I do think that, yeah, some people, sometimes they don't realize, or they've never really been held accountable for their actions. Therefore, they think that they can speak to you like this, or that they can demand these things of you and not have to give back in return. But I think
it's entitlement.
It's entitlement.
Entitlement.
For sure. It's entitlement. It's a little bit of ego. A little bit conceited. And I think it's okay to let them know. They might not want to be your friend after that, and that's fine. But I feel like as we get more into our 20s and head towards our mid 20s, which is scary, we don't have time for BS anymore. Like, if you don't mess with me how I am, or if you feel like I'm not meeting your needs, then that's fine. we don't have to be friends, or we don't have to be whatever. So don't be afraid to cut people off, but also open communication is the best thing you can do, and then you can figure it out from there.
It also gives the same energy as like having that best friend that doesn't want you to have any other friends outside of them.
Yeah.
It's like, oh, you're my best friend, but I have XYZ other friends over here, but you're not allowed to have anyone else.
Yeah.
The minute you start hanging out with person A, I'm going to throw an attack and like, you know, go crazy at both of you because you're excluding me, yada, yada, yada. So I think there's so many iterations of this, and ultimately it comes down to control, like you said, and this person wanting to feel a semblance of manipulation and power over the other people in a way that was not conducive to genuine friendship. So just, you know, see if you can address it directly, and if not, it's probably time to move on.
Okay.
All right, guys. Thank you so much for listening this week. That was our episode. Once again, this is the Jasmine Ortiz Show. My name is Jasmine Ortiz. I'm here with my lovely co-host, Jordi Polycarp. We'll see you again next week. Bye. Keep it Jasmine.